Good morning. Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington, Monday the 25th of January 2020. Woke up to a nice snowy carpet on the streets and on the lawns and on the houses. Brr, a cold day. Stay inside if you can. If you can't, be careful out there. It's pretty slick. Yeah. We've been looking at Leviticus, and today we finish chapters 26 and 27. 26 has what we would call blessings and curses, and this is a formula we have seen before, and a formula we will see again. If then you obey the commandments of the Lord, this is what your lives shall look like. If you disobey the commands of the Lord, then this is what your lives will look like. That's really chapter 26. Chapter 27 deals with specific kinds of offerings and dedicating things to the Lord. And once something's dedicated, can it be redeemed or undedicated? And if so, how much extra do you add? These are part of this ritualistic detail from one of the oral sources that really wants us to understand that they were a very technical and legal society when it came to their response to God. But the 26th chapter, the blessings and the curses, the things that go well if you follow the commandments, and the things that don't go well if you don't follow the commandments, is really a tricky thing to interpret, because we live in a country that has struggled from its beginning. There is a conversation between the common and the individual. What is individual responsibility? What is individual liberty? What is corporate or societal responsibility? What is societal liberty? And these two have fought and are still at the heart of divisions in our country today, because it's not something that's easily going to be solved. This idea, the Jeffersonian idea that God gave each individual a modicum of wisdom, and that wisdom is to be exercised in freedom and in responsibility according to the individual. We have phrases such as, I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps, meaning I'm not giving credit to anybody. I am a self-made person. This is the person who says they'll take responsibility, they'll admit it when it goes wrong, but they'll take credit when it goes right. They don't see that there's a society around them which in any way gave them opportunities. They might find it difficult to give thanks to a God who has given them life, breath, food, air, water, and yes, opportunities. Then there's the opposite, saying that everything is corporate. Everybody owns in common, which we saw in the book of Acts. It was a very short-lived experiment that people tried to share everything, and they found that some people were lying about how much they were really giving, and it encouraged some people to stop working altogether, as we know from the writings of Paul, to where Paul had to say, it is now taught among us, you don't work, you don't eat. So giving too much responsibility for the society to take care of every individual means that individuals can get away with skating. They can get away with not pulling their weight. And Thomas Jefferson would say, but why would they? It makes no sense. Well, and we would say human sin. There are going to be people that don't pull their own weight. And why would we say that a person is self-made when they're obviously not? There's no such thing. We're all part of a society. Indeed, we don't own the land. I talked the other day about 99-year leases. Well, we have a 99-year lease on a body. And it may not be good for that long. It may be good for slightly longer. On average, it's really like a 76-year lease. Maybe 78 for women, 75 for men. But the lease expires. We don't own the body, then how can we own anything that the body claims to own? Yeah. So there it is. We are mortal, and we are both individual and corporate. But that's the hard thing, is for me to claim individual freedom and yet I need to be aware that what I do may well have ripple effects. If I pour poison in a lake and my neighbor's animals drink from that lake, well, I only poured it in on my side of the lake. Yeah, good luck having it stay on my side of the lake. And that's why the environment is such a controversial topic. There are those who say humans can't possibly affect the environment in negative ways. Well, we know that over-farming can lead to erosion of topsoil and depletion of nutrients. And we know that adding artificial nutrients can lead to stronger diseases that overcome the nutrients, stronger pests that are immune to the pesticides. And the pesticides may give us cancer, but the pests are eating the grain just fine. So our solutions often create further, more complex problems. But the individual will say, but I'm just doing my own thing. I'm not responsible for anybody but me. And that it really would go against the Hebrew concept. In Leviticus, they are the people of God. They have to have checks on individual behavior because individuals act like they have more freedom than they really do. They have freedom in a limited sense. They are not slaves anymore, but they are a people. They have the freedom to go their own way if they want to die. Or they have the responsibility to follow a very strict rule, very strict way of God if they want to live and prosper and conquer the land God promised to their ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So what we do as individuals does indeed affect the greater. If 100 of us do something, that's 100 times more than what one of us doing. And if 7 billion of us do the same thing, then there's going to be a human effect on whatever it is we do, including the world we live on. The thing is, we get fooled because, again, in Leviticus 26, they do something, God acts, or God orders them to act. We do something, and it may take decades for the effect to see. In the first church in which I served in the Southern California desert, there is a Navy base. And in the 1950s, when the base was first a landing strip and then when it became a research base, they had leftover aviation fuel, jet fuel. They poured it into sinkholes in the desert. Well, they needed schools, and the school that my son first attended happened to be on the Navy base. Well, when you got a school, you also need a water supply. They had waters. They sank wells, and the wells pulled water up from aquifers that had been poisoned by these jet fuels. And a number of children got sick with cancer that all attended that same school. It was some years before we had lived there. And these children and their parents then came to the conclusion there's something in the water. The water was tested. It was found to have jet fuel in it, and that children were especially susceptible to it. The Navy said, well, that can't possibly be our fault. We just poured water into a hole in the desert. How can that, and the water's filtered and all that, how can it not filter everything out? And it ended up in courts and lawsuits, and the U.S. Navy lost and had to pay a lot of money to a lot of families because their children died horribly of cancers caused by people who thought, let's just solve a problem quickly. So the environment is always going to be a controversial thing. Am I allowed to do what I want and ignore that the consequence to my neighbor may not be desirable, it may be deleterious? Not in God's eyes, not in God's world. That's the lesson of Leviticus is be aware of the consequences of what you do, not just for you, yourself, and your family, but the ripple effect. Think bigger than that. Think about the common. We are a common people. The Capitol Mall has been in the news a lot lately because it's a place where things happen, where people gather, where there are inaugurations, where there are protests. I've walked on the Capitol Mall with my family. Just this large grassy area between Lincoln Memorial on one end and the U.S. Capitol on the other, with the Washington Monument in the middle and Jefferson Memorial off to the right and the White House off to the left. Large grass, somebody's got to mow it, I suppose, right? But that's common. That is, as someone said, America's living room or America's family room. That's where we go to sit, to gather, to be the people. It's not owned by any single person. It's available to everybody. But if a handful of people disrupt it, then it's available to nobody. Common spaces are rare enough. The rich don't need them. The poor have to have them. The ones who have ways of getting their voices heard can bribe by lobbyists, do whatever they need to do. But the people's place has always been the common. And we will continue to have this tension between the common and the prosperous. And the prosperous will always say the common are trying to level the playing field by cheating from all of us, by taxing us to the point where we are now working for them and they are now receiving for what they didn't earn. And the common, the people, will always say, we want fairness. We want at least to be able to have the same shot that they have. We don't want a fixed game. We want a level playing field. These two sides will always argue in our country. That's what the two view, or the adversarial, or the two-party system has always been about. In Leviticus, it doesn't exist. We cannot take our modern understanding, our American mindset, and put it into Leviticus. They are one people. They have one God. They have a common destiny. What the individual does can never be divorced from the outcome of the whole people of God. And especially so if you're the one in power, the priest, the prophet, or the king. See you tomorrow.